Once upon a time, in a big forest filled with tall trees and lots of squirrels, there lived a little squirrel named Sophie. Now, Sophie the Squirrel loved autumn more than any other season, and fun games of hide and seek, where she and her squirrel friends would dart between the frosty branches. There was just something magical about the autumn season. It was her favorite time of the year. She loved how the leaves turned to gold, how the air smelled fresh and crispy, and most of all, she loved how the forest floor was scattered with yummy acorns. She might have lost most of her winter stash, but there were still lots of acorns left in the forest, and she would find them all. Some sneaky chipmunk or blue jay had already beaten her there and gathered up all the acorns for themselves. Day after day, Sophie searched, and day after day, she came home empty. And as the temperatures dropped and the first snowflakes began to fall, Sophie started to get very, very worried indeed. So, she had always been a bit envious of them. But seeing this bluebird working hard to build his nest made Sophie stop and think. Maybe he knew where some extra acorns were hiding, she thought. But as the days passed and the temperatures dropped, her supply slowly dwindled, until once again she had to venture out into the forest in search of more. So gathering up all her courage, Sophie called out to him, "Excuse me, Mr. Bluebird, have you seen any acorns around here?" Excuse me," she called out softly. "Are you awake?" And after walking a while, she came across a tiny cottage made of leaves and twigs. Peeking inside, she saw a hedgehog snuggled up in a ball, fast asleep. "I need to collect some food for the winter. This is the spot," he said, pointing with his little paw. "Under these bushes are some of the biggest acorns I've ever seen." Looking at Hazel, she said, "You know, Hazel, you've helped me so much today. I've already gathered enough for myself." "You keep all the acorns, little squirrel. I'd love to give you half of my acorns so you can gather even more." "Well, that sounds like a fair trade to me," he said. "Thank you, Sophie. That's what friends are for, right?" So taking a deep breath and puffing out her cheeks, Sophie set off on a big adventure through the forest, determined to gather enough food for the whole winter. And even though they both had plenty of food for the winter, they decided to go on more adventures together, just in case they needed to find more. He then scurried outside, beckoned with his nose for Sophie to follow, and they were soon off, bounding through the undergrowth together. So one crisp and chilly morning, after saying goodbye to her mom and dad, who were very worried about her, of course, Sophie set off into the unknown, deeper into the woods than she had ever been before. Sophie and the hedgehog, whose name was Hazel, spent the whole morning gathering the acorns, making 2 little piles, one for each of them to take home for the winter. "I'm looking for some acorns to eat during the winter, and I heard that this part of the forest had some, but I haven't seen any yet. It was the kind of storm that made the trees sway and the branches crash, that made the poor little squirrels lose their hats and their bushy tails." Finally, just as the sun began to set and Sophie started to feel a bit scared and a bit sorry for herself, she spotted something. "Well, now that you mention it," he said, tilting his head, "I did see some very large acorns near a big oak tree not too far from here. But you'll have to hurry, little squirrel, because there are lots of us birds looking for them, and if we don't gather enough, we won't have enough food for the winter either." Halfway up a tall tree sat a little bluebird, gathering twigs and leaves to build a nest for himself. All the acorns that she had been collecting for months now were gone, scattered by the wind, lost forever. And as she gazed across the forest floor, bare and brown, Sophie's heart sank even lower because she realized that winter was coming, and without all those acorns stashed away, she wouldn't have any food to eat during the cold months ahead. And without another word, she scrambled up the tree and disappeared into the branches. And unfortunately, it was also the kind of storm that blew away lots and lots of acorns. So every day, Sophie would scamper around, gathering as many acorns as she could, hiding them in secret spots all over the forest, so she could snuggle up and munch on them during the long winter. And although she enjoyed the winter very much, too, with its blanket of sparkling snow, but this year, things were going to be different, because one afternoon, while Sophie was gathering some particularly large and luscious-looking acorns, a big storm blew through the forest. When the storm finally passed and the sun peeked back out from behind the clouds, Sophie looked down at her paws sadly. But Sophie was a brave and determined little squirrel, and she wasn't about to give up. "No, sir," She scampered up tall trees and over bubbling streams, searched every nook and cranny. But it seemed like everywhere she went, it was then that Sophie decided she needed to venture further than she had ever gone before. As she journeyed, Sophie climbed over fallen logs and leaped over bushes, pushed through prickly thorns and scurried along narrow ledges. Now, usually, Sophie didn't pay much attention to the birds. After all, they could fly and she couldn't. The little bluebird paused and looked down at Sophie. "Thank you, Mr. Bluebird," said Sophie. "That sounds like exactly what I'm looking for." Up in her cozy dray, safe from the wind and the rain, Sophie munched happily on her acorns, her tummy rumbling with delight. This time, though, instead of going the same way as before, Sophie followed the winding riverbank. Now, Sophie had never spoken to a hedgehog before, but seeing this cute little creature fast asleep in his cozy den made her forget her shyness. The hedgehog stirred and slowly uncurled his prickly body. "Yes, I'm awake," he mumbled sleepily. "Can I help you?" "Oh, hello," said Sophie, taken aback by how nice the hedgehog sounded. The hedgehog stretched out and yawned widely. "Well, you're in luck, little squirrel, because I'm just on my way to gather some myself." After a while, the hedgehog stopped and sniffed the ground. And sure enough, there underneath the thorny bushes lay a whole grove of enormous acorns, all plump and juicy and just waiting to be picked. Then suddenly, as the sun shone brightly through the trees and the birds sang sweetly in the branches above, Sophie had an idea. Hazel's eyes widened in surprise. "Oh, no, thank you," he said quickly. "But I really want to share them with you," insisted Sophie. And Hazel smiled. From then on, Sophie and Hazel became the best of friends, playing together every day and sharing all their acorns. So hand in hand, or paw in hand, should I say, they set off into the forest.